You sigh as you wait for a bite. The fish have been weird recently, much like everything has since the world ended, you guess. You weren't even sure if they were safe to eat, but fishing was all you knew, and nothing was taking that away from you, even if the fish glowed sometimes. It's nothing some radaway wouldn't fix. Suddenly, off the bow, something truly gigantic rises. Something you've never seen before, and the last thing you hear is the wet slap of webbed claws behind you. You didn't know it, but you were the first victim of the new apocalypse that no one saw coming. The ocean is beautiful and terrifying. In real life, we have creatures like the big fin squid or anglerfish, and the deeper you get, the creepier things become. Now, what happens when you take that, add radiation, FEV, and Lovecraftian horrors from beyond? You get Fallout, and the next great threat to humanity. Buckle in. Today, we'll be investigating all the sea creatures we've seen in Fallout and the new connections between the Lovecraftian entities of Fallout and the ocean. So, grab your Mothman blanket, get comfy, and prepare to dive, literally, into the world of Fallout. Now, for some backstory, before the Great War, fishing was a huge industry. Companies like Macro Fish Packing were in constant competition trying to sign up any independent fishing boat they could, especially if it could reduce their competitors' inventory as well at the same time. Unfortunately, this is the Fallout universe, so what would it be without corporations taking the shortcut for profits and not caring about the consequences? The Nahant Oceanological Society was exploring this very thing before the bombs dropped, and what they found was disturbing and laid the foundation for the wasteland we know today. Now, I apologize for the next part. Lake Quannapowitt, I probably butchered that, was once a popular tourist attraction with an annual bass fishing tournament. The Massachusetts Department of Natural Resources was monitoring the lake, and when they detected an increase in radiation and pollutants, they reached out to the Nahant Society to check their findings. What they found was the toxicity levels were 15 times higher than the previous year, and well beyond safe levels for people to be swimming. This turned out to be due to mass fusion pumping out their toxic waste into the water. Of course, the mayor didn't listen when told the water wasn't safe, and went ahead with the tournament, resulting in 27 individuals suffering from radiation sickness, one boat sinking, and the 2 survivors needing treatment for radiation burns. Not a single fish was caught that year. This was fairly indicative of a larger problem across the country. The Nahant Society was tracking toxicity levels in wild cod and barnacles, and found a 34% increase month to month compared to those they kept as a control, though no one at the Boston Port Authority would take their calls to even listen to their concerns. And perhaps more interestingly, the average mass of crabs and lobsters was found to be increasing, with a 14% increase in crabs and a 12% increase in lobsters, which they believed would cause a colony collapse due to the increased pressure placed on their food source. Of course, again, no one took them seriously, and when they brought their findings to Galaxy News Network, they did do a report on it, about how great the shellfish season was going to be. I do want to say my autocorrect changed that to shellfish season, and it's pretty appropriate for all of this. So, even without the bombs dropping, people were already dumping enough pollutants to begin mutating aquatic life. But what about after the bombs? Was fishing still in practice? Starting on the coast of California, back in the original Fallout, you could encounter a wary fisherman and his son in a random encounter. The two of them are nomadic, so as to avoid politics, as in his own words, "You know, there's too much politics in the world. I keep telling my boy that these politicians can't wait to blow up the world again." They've survived by fishing, gathering, and scavenging, drifting from place to place, but due to the recent explosion in the number of rad scorpions, scavenging is no longer safe, and now even the fish are becoming scarce. He does ask the Vault Dweller to be quiet so as to not scare the fish away, but then admits that it doesn't matter anyway, as it's probably Skunk that's scaring the fish away. Skunk is his arch nemesis, a giant three-eyed catfish that has been scaring everything away from his fishing spot. Though we never see the catfish ourselves, the fisherman is dead set on catching it, even stating, "I know it's just a saying, but I love the implication that Skunk could literally walk away, as if it had legs." Keep that in mind for later, as it will actually be relevant again. In Fallout 2, we get more confirmation that the fisherman wasn't crazy to try survive off of fish. In Chinatown within San Francisco, many she merchants spend their days selling fish or in fishing boats off the coast, to the point that citizens can be overheard complaining about how all they get is seaweed and fish and a bit of rice. The soil in the surrounding area isn't very good for crop growth, so it's about all they have for nutrients. More interesting though is a random encounter in the coastal tiles above Navarro, where you can encounter a group of fishermen that worship the sea goddess. Just before a storm, they throw their spears into the ocean, and if they prove their bravery, then the goddess will reward them with fruit. At the beginning of the storm season, they throw brock flowers into the sea, and then it's returned to them as xander root. And once a year, they give tribute of xander root to the sea, which, if they are found worthy, will again be returned to them as brock flowers. Finally, after a bountiful harvest, they give tribute to the sea, and every year to reward them, the goddess sends spears on the waves to show that she is watching over them. So either there is a goddess watching over them, or another tribe up the coast has similar traditions, and they just keep swapping brock flowers and xander roots. Far Harbour is another settlement that primarily lives off of the gifts of the sea, though they have a more antagonistic relationship with it. So far, we've mainly talked about the fish, and we'll get to some of the more Lovecraftian ones later on. But Far Harbour is as good a place as any to start looking at those other denizens of the deep that have landed upon the shores. Let's start with something that may have crawled from the abyssal depths onto land. This is an anglerfish. They live in the deepest reaches of the ocean and luring creatures for food by fishing. They have an inbuilt rod with a light on it to attract prey. Also, just on a side tangent about anglerfish, they have one of the craziest male-female dynamics I know. Males are absolutely tiny in comparison to the females, and upon finding a female, the male will bite onto her so that you don't get lost in the abyssal depths. Over time, the male body essentially melts into the female, until all that's left is a pair of testicles attached to her side. She can then use these whenever she's ready for children. This exists. It's real. I can't think of a more compelling reason to worry about FEV's effects on the ocean than this. And now, you too share this cursed knowledge. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. It seems that at some point, they decided the ocean wasn't enough for them, and journeyed towards land, massively mutating until they became more bipedal, with pronounced forward limbs that operate like arms. They've kept their terrifying faces and lights, and still use them to lure in prey. In Far Harbour, and in the swamps of 76, lure weeds grow on top of the water. It's a prey plant that glows, and the anglers have adapted to have an appendage that looks identical. They'll find a patch and submerge below it, leaving just their lure hanging out until someone comes nearby. Then they burst from the water to attack. Also, in case I didn't mention it, they also spit fireballs, igniting a mucus they produce to fire at their prey. Absolutely terrifying creatures that leave you paranoid about every pool of water you come to. Now, speaking of horrifying, the fog on Far Harbour hides one of the most terrifying creatures in the game, the fog crawler. These oversized crustaceans prowl through the fog and are incredibly quick and deadly with their scythe-like arms. If you're smart, they can be avoided. All you have to do is listen out for their booming foghorn-like noises. Though, in the fog, it's not always easy to know where you're going. It's also stated that even Deathclaws would think twice about fighting one, which just goes to show how high up on the food chain the fog crawler is. Taking a look at the fog crawler's body, it seems to have mutated from some of the local shrimp, as it shares similar body characteristics, though it's nothing like the little shrimp we know today. And surprisingly, it isn't the only deadly shrimp in the series, though the next one never managed to make it into a game. You see, we did almost get mutant mantis shrimp, which would have been terrifying. Way back when Interplay was working on the Fallout MMO, Project V13, they also produced something called the Armageddon Rag, an in-universe newsletter on a prototype Pip-Boy that included news for the MMO and what would be included. One of these was a story called On the Beach. In the story, several mantis shrimp attack a group of Brotherhood soldiers, throwing punches at a supersonic speed, even being able to shatter power armor. The ones we have are tiny in comparison, coming in at around 30 centimeters, and their strikes have the equivalent power of a .22, which may not be the most powerful caliber, but it is still terrifying from something so small. And then you scale that up with mutant strength. These things could probably tear apart most fleshy creatures, having evolved to destroy shells. I mentioned earlier that before the war, crabs and lobster sizes were growing and would soon destabilize their own food sources. Well, somehow that turned out to not happen, and the inclusion of massive amounts of radiation and some potentially otherworldly influences has resulted in the Mirelurks we know today. There are several main forms of Mirelurks we've seen so far. Hatchlings or spawn, regular old Mirelurks, hunters, kings and queens, with maybe one more which we'll get into. Hatchlings are fairly straightforward. If you disturb a nest, they can hatch and attack, or if you really upset a queen, she can also just throw her children at you to attack. We've only really seen one form of these, so the implication is that they are like ants and are a polymorphic species. This simply means that depending on a wide range of factors such as what the hive needs, or environmental factors, the hatchlings will grow to one of the adult forms. Whether that's a queen or a hunter could be simply based on what they feed them. Next, we have the regular Mirelurks, and in Fallout 3, we can actually get a report on them as to what they are. After going to enormous lengths to procure DNA samples of hypothesized forebears, we cannot explain why ancestry evidence is present from two vastly different creatures: the Limulus polyphemus, or horseshoe crab, and the Calinectis sapidus, blue crab. It's obvious that a mutation occurred, giving this creature bipedal movement and a massive growth, but I cannot explain the presence of multiple subphylum markers in DNA/RNA. Given their mystifying origins, I've decided the species deserves its own classification, and have thus dubbed them Scylla serrata horrendus. They can often be found in sewers and caves and should be considered hostile and very dangerous, as their chitinous shells provide excellent resistance to both firearms and handheld weapons. They are disgusting creatures, and I cannot fathom their popularity as a food source among the citizens of the wasteland. The regular Mirelurks are therefore definitely based off blue crabs and horseshoe crab, which the horseshoe crab isn't actually a crab, and definitely has its own reasons for wanting revenge on humanity. Seriously, horseshoe milking is really weird and messed up. We get a wide variety of Mirelurks, from the relatively weak soft shells to the more menacing blood rages to the adorable, in an I'll murder you way, Red Death. In Fallout 76, we can find a corpse near several Mirelurk eggs, with a Mirelurk research note nearby that breaks them down in rather horrifying detail. The Mirelurks appear to be a fearsome and formidable creature. They are generally social with other Mirelurks, however, they tend to be aggressive to other creatures, and one another if one gets too close to another. Their eyesight appears to be poor, but they have an extraordinary sense of smell. One would be advised to always stand downwind from them. After leaving the camp for a short while, I returned to find that it had been completely ravaged by the Mirelurks, and all my rations had been devoured. Their large set of claws appear to be used primarily for hunting. Once their prey has been captured, the smaller set of claws on their abdomen is used to strip their prey down to the bone in a matter of minutes. The large, hardened carapace on their back appears to be their primary defense mechanism. However, it is to be noted that most of the medium to large fauna in the area tend to ignore them. They also grow remarkably fast. It only appears to take them a few weeks for them to reach maturity. This furthers my theory that if these creatures could be domesticated, we could have a near limitless supply of food for the Free States. Tomorrow, when the nest is unguarded, I'll attempt to acquire a few eggs and return to base with them for the further study. Given that we find a body here, I think it's fair to assume stealing the eggs didn't end well for them. Then we have the hunters, and for clarity, we're talking about Fallout 4 and 76. In Fallout 3, hunters seem to just be another stronger variant of the crab Mirelurk. The hunters added in Fallout 4 are based off of lobsters, and given the art for them, we're lucky we didn't end up with some kind of horrific lobstermen. They're tougher than the crab Mirelurks and show up in smaller numbers. We don't know why they're called hunters, but I assume, given their greater combat abilities, they are like guards for the other Mirelurks and work to help bring in food, though we have seen regular Mirelurks be capable of taking down enemies themselves. The queens are huge, heavily mutated amalgamations of both hunters and Mirelurks, with the lobster-like tail behind them and the shell on top. They also come equipped with giant scythe-like claws, and again, as I said earlier, the ability to spray their children at aggressors. Queens are typically found near nests and are highly aggressive, attacking anything they see to protect their clutch. You know, writing this, I realized Mirelurks are just the xenomorphs of the ocean. They have hives, queens, specific forms for specific jobs, and are horrifying killing machines. Before we get to the kings, because that's a whole other kettle of fish, excuse the pun, there is another creature that does seem to fit in with the Mirelurks. It's not the anglers, or the gulpers, but the much less seen hermit crabs. Honestly, the first time meeting these critters is horrifying. I had no idea about them the first time I met one, and I'll be honest, it scared the hell out of me when the random half a van I was walking past grew legs and began attacking me. Now, I'm not throwing them in here just because they're crabs, and I'm grouping all the crabs together, but more because of their children. When fighting a hermit crab, it may retreat into its shell and, just like the queen, unleash its hatchlings to attack. These hatchlings, except for the coloration, use the exact same model as the Mirelurk hatchlings. It's also worth noting that hermit crabs and Mirelurks aren't aggressive towards each other. In my tests, they never attacked each other once. It could be any number of reasons. Maybe they're advanced scouts looking for new Mirelurk nest locations. Maybe if a hatchling somehow survives on its own, it grows into a more self-sufficient form, finding armor to protect itself and gaining the ability to reproduce. Or maybe if we get a little crazy, Bethesda was lazy and didn't want to create a new model. Though them being friendly could indicate something more. The kings have a similar issue to the hunters, and we'll be discussing the Fallout 4 and 76 variations first, as the Fallout 3 king is more relevant later to the Eldritch gods. Mirelurk kings are interesting as they don't share any of the characteristics of other Mirelurks. In 4 and 76, Mirelurk kings are more frog-like in appearance, capable of turning invisible to ambush prey with their fearsome sonic attacks and flexible claws. They're no pushovers. These kings have a distinctly humanoid form, though they don't typically walk on two legs. According to John Loeb's ArtStation account, where he was creating this new form, he was trying to move towards a more bestial creature, but wanted to keep the evolution separated from the Mirelurks. You see, they have a somewhat parasitic relationship with Mirelurks, having gained the ability to dominate and control the less intelligent Mirelurks to do their bidding. Also, Jonah calls his creation a Lovecraftian monstrosity, which is worth noting. It's also worth mentioning that the kings have evolved both gills and lungs so they can be on land and below water indefinitely. Given their other abilities like camouflage and raising an army of Mirelurks to distract, they would make fantastic assassins, and I'll never feel safe near water again. Now, Fallout 3 and New Vegas' kings look quite different. You can't tell me that this isn't just a guy. Nicknamed the Snapping Turtle variant after a quote from the Fallout 3 art book, this variant displays similar sonic attacks to the frog version, and, given the fact it looks so different, I would assume the same kind of domination ability, which we'll see more of. But first, I want to also mention the Point Lookout variation, just for being unique. These are called Swamp Lurk Queens, and have a more green coloration with green glowing eyes, and instead of a sonic attack, they have an acidic spit attack, just like Mirelurk Queens. In one of Fallout 76's more recent updates, we got fishing and a lot more Lovecraftian lore. It added the new location, Fisherman's Rest, that is home to some very unique characters. Now, while exploring the mire, you'll receive a new broadcast signal and the quest Casting Off.
Know that we have finally arrived. If ye possess a strong arm and an unwavering countenance, then ye be fit to fish the waters of the wasteland with us. Come find our stall at Fisherman's Rest in the Mire for the finest rods and tackle. Through our many hands, the secrets of these rivers will reveal themselves. Wait. What am I saying? What does that mean? Come on!
Something definitely seems a bit off, but it's time for some relaxing fishing. So, off to the Fisherman Rest we go. At the Fisherman's Rest, we meet Linda Lee, a hermit crab that's taken residence in the remains of the actual Linda Lee boat. I tried looking into that to see if Linda Lee was like a reference to something, but I couldn't really find anything. I did find a few boats named that, so it might just be a common boat name. There's also the fisherman, who is more concerned with his fish and just growls and grunts at you, and he's definitely a fishman. And finally, Captain Raymond Clark. The longer you talk to the captain, the more the cracks start to appear. Whenever he's about to reveal anything or say anything about his fishy friend, he appears to have a headache and change his tune, almost like he's being controlled. He gives you the tutorial quest for fishing to catch some fish that the fisherman will use as some kind of bait, but you don't appear to bring back the right fish, as they just need turning into fish bits and feeding to the Linda Lee, who's so thankful they throw up a random legendary weapon. Then every day the captain will give you a quest to go gather fish from areas around the map and then mark them down in his ledger so he can track the fish in the area. And that's the update. Unless, of course, you try digging a little deeper. When questioned about his past, the captain either has one of his changes of mind or moves on with something else. But scattered around the camp, we can find parts of his diary. Entry 1. Sold most of our catches for far cheaper than we ought this month, but I just can't bear to see the state of the poor souls that we meet in the ports. At least this way they can fill their bellies for a night. The men think I've gone soft, but they're forgetting how easy we've got it. Entry 2. Spied some almighty shadows beneath the ship of late. These waters grow more treacherous with every passing day. If it's not the sea herself, it's the creatures within. Entry 3. Blessed Poseidon have mercy on our wretched souls. The storm has raged at us for 3 days and nights. It didn't give us the faintest warning of its coming, neither. She better blow over soon, for Linda Lee can't take much more of this abuse. Entry 4. I feel I must be dreaming. I've woken up ashore? God knows how. Flashes of terrible visions plague my mind. I'll be damned if I can tell whether they're nightmares or memories, though. Same figure always lurking in them. It's hard to know what's real or not anymore. Especially now I'm plagued with these strange urges. Entry 5. Been following them for so long now, doing all kinds of strange things. Anything to stop the pain. Find myself in agony often. Or is it ecstasy? After this, the captain switched to holotapes, and we can hear him sinking into madness.
Ever since I washed up on these shores, my mind's felt more and more adrift. I'm hoping this might be a way to keep me anchored. My name is Captain Raymond Clark. My father was a bosun, and so was his father before him. My mother's name was Deirdre, and she had long flaxen hair. This is foolish. How do I stop this thing? It's been a few weeks, or months, since I recorded one of these. Whole season seemed to go by without my noticing. My head's been so clouded I can barely keep track of what state we're in. Come on, Raymond, hold it together. My name is Captain Raymond Clark. My father was a bosun. My mother's name was... Oh, confound it! My name is Captain. I'm a captain. It's my job to fish. To catch as many fish as we can. My father was a fish, and my mother...
This backstory leans heavily on Lovecraft's book, The Call of Cthulhu. I did consider Dagon, as they share similar themes, but a lot more lines up with The Call of Cthulhu. During the short story, the main character collects news and information from around the world surrounding Cthulhu and an earthquake that took place. At the same time, people around the world began to have terrifying nightmares, and artists were driven to create renditions of Cthulhu, without even knowing what they were creating. What's really interesting, and more importantly relevant though, is the voyage of Johansson on the Emma. See, the earthquake brought with it a terrible storm, and the Emma was stuck in it. Once they cleared the storm, they were attacked by another ship filled with loathsome men. Only a few survived the attack, but with the Emma sinking, they had to steal the attacker's boat, leaving Johansson and his remaining crew to push on, finding a landmass that shouldn't have been: the rotting city of R'lyeh. During their time there, they accidentally released Cthulhu, who wiped out most of the crew. Until, and I love this bit, using the steamboat they'd taken earlier, they managed to run into Cthulhu's head and pop it, leaving Cthulhu and the Nightmare City behind, while Cthulhu did rapidly heal and sank back beneath the waves. I just love the mental image of them being like, we're so screwed, and then just ramming a boat straight into it and carrying on like nothing happened. After this, they were once again caught in a storm. Though Johansson was barely keeping it together at that point, they were somehow rescued. Later, no landmass was found. The second storm must have pushed it back beneath the waves. See, the parallels are definitely interesting. The captain also had his crew and ship stuck in a terrible storm, until they landed upon a landmass, and, after losing his mind, only the captain has returned. Well, him and his fishy friend. Let's take a look at his companion then. They share a striking resemblance to the Mirelurk kings of Fallout 3, and even though they never communicate with words, they're shown to be intelligent, communicating by using gestures and directing you to the captain, who also seems to understand what exactly they want. Now, remember back when we said kings could dominate other Mirelurks? Well, something similar seems to be going on here. Something is definitely in the captain's head, controlling his actions. It's not perfect, as we can see whenever he starts to say something the fisherman doesn't like, and it takes control, changing his mind mid-sentence. I assume, similar to the Mirelurks, the fisherman is also controlling the hermit crab as well. But then, why are they here? They're obviously looking for something, and using the Vault 76 dwellers to search for it. Well, there
are other things in this world now that cannot be explained. The end of the world has awoken. Something. We all know the Mothman is out there, stalking and watching us. But what of the unseen? There are things we can only glimpse in our minds. Great entities beyond our comprehension. The Mothman is a creature more like us than the unknowable horrors in the peripheral vision of our subconscious minds. No longer just a false memory now. I have heard a tale of this entity made real, deep in the earth. The storyteller was mad by any reckoning, but his story, no less true. My name is Jeff Lane, and I will lay bare this Watcher. No matter how deep I must go, I will come to know the true nature of the Interloper. The Interloper is here. I can feel it clearly. Last night, in visions more real than the senses, it called to me, and I go to it now. Signs are all around that I am not the only one to hear the call, though where they have failed, I will not, for it summons me alone in the end. Before I go deeper, for the truth revealed changes all. By its very nature, let it be known, in this world, the Interloper has chosen Jeff Lane as the conduit of the unknowable. Together, the hidden reality becomes manifest at long last.
After the true Mothman followers arrived and the two cults combined, a schism was caused, when Brother Charles realized the first priestess of the wood wasn't actually worshipping the true wise Mothman. Charles took his true believers and left. Presumably, then everyone else either died or left after the Scotch Plague swept the area. Now, when we visit the Lucky Hole mine, through several hidden paths in the back of the cave, we can actually find the Interloper, a large, gruesome creature that seems to be in the middle of growing. And, from the corpses around it, it was being fed humans. After the Wastelanders update, this mine became filled with false Mothman cultists, who've been worshipping this entity and presumably still feeding it. And with the update, right by the Interloper, we can now find woven baskets filled with fish. that are identical to the ones found at the Fisherman's Rest. We can also find an obelisk here that might be the one from the note, or not, as there was another obelisk of much greater importance in the past that affects all the Lovecraftian lore that they've built. Way back in Fallout 3, we had the Dunwich Building, one of the most terrifying locations in a Fallout game. Not only was it filled with Fallout 3's ghouls, which were some of the creepiest in the series, the place was very clearly haunted, doors opening and closing, objects moving, and my ever favourite holotape.
God help me. I found Dad today. I didn't think it was him, but... face. The zombies didn't touch him. I think he was becoming like them. Didn't know it was him until I found that old book near him. No more killing. I just need to go. Can't forget the book. All I have left of him. It's warm against the stone. I'll just rest a while.
The Dunwich Company before the war and afterwards were worshipping eldritch entities, and below the Dunwich Building, still exerting its control, is an obelisk connected to Ugg Qualtoff. There's even a questline connected to this location through the Point Lookout DLC. Upon finding Black Hole Manor, an old man in a wheelchair will greet you. Obadiah wants your help returning a book that was stolen from him, the Krydonis. We learn that this was used by his ancestor to control the island, letting her live well beyond her natural years until the book was stolen from her. At the end of the quest, you can either return the book to Obadiah, where you find he has a ritual site set up in his basement with a decapitated body, or you can return the book to the obelisk, obliterating it in the process. So the obelisk could be either one of these, or a third one we don't know about. From the tabletop role-playing game expansion Winter of Atom, we know these obelisks were fairly common in the architecture of the old ones. That's not all we can gather from the note though. For a start, the note is called The Deep. We also have a location on 76 called The Deep, and hidden within its widening caves is a very Interloper-like being. Known in the game files as the Visitor's Corpse, it bears a striking resemblance to the Interloper. It's unknown how it died. Maybe without anyone to feed it, it starved, or the nearby mining facility killed it. We just don't know. The note could be referencing another location with new content though. Big Maw has always been one of those locations that has drawn me in, which, considering the implications, may not be a good thing. The Maw is a large pit that has water at the bottom. It's usually inhabited with floaters, and the false Mothman cult has been using this location to sacrifice people. A nearby note that can be found might explain why. I don't know why I came to the Big Maw. I'd never considered why we called it that. As far back as I can remember, that's just what it was called. I remember family picnics here and the older kids climbing down to swim in the summer. Now though, there can be no question. I cannot say for certain which of the circumstances has caused it to open. I do know that I must go inside. Is it the smell, the sound, the warmth? Even as I write these last words, I am impatient to look back into the yawning abyss. The true Maw, the ancient namesake of Big Maw. Honestly, I love the Lovecraftian themes of this one. The draw of the unknown, a dark, terrifying location that's oddly compelling and draws in the writer, even though they know it's not a good idea. The implication here is that for some reason Big Maw opened at one point and drew people in, before closing again, leaving us to wonder what could be down there in the true Maw. Well, the fishing update may have just given us a glimpse. If you spend a ton of time fishing and ticking off your fishing challenges, you'll eventually upgrade your fishing rod enough to be able to hunt down living legends. I just had terrible luck on all like the dailies and stuff, so this took me way longer than it should have. And in the Maw, we can catch Ril Tikanoff, the Maw-Begotten. Now, that's definitely an eldritch name if I've ever heard one. Putting aside the hard to pronounce bit at the beginning, begotten essentially means give birth to, meaning the Maw is the origin of this thing. Maybe a sign of the creatures that the poor note writer saw when they were drawn into the Maw. Maybe this is the kind of fish the fisherman is actually looking for. Now back to the note that started all of this. It does have scribbling of a madman on it, and it's highly difficult to decipher. I think maybe up here it says something like learn their delay. Down the bottom we have something like I not show my kind, maybe, with a thanks in the bottom. I think maybe some words are covered up, and obviously the doctor level of handwriting really doesn't help. I'm kind of hoping you guys can help me with this one. I've spent way too many hours staring at this note, and all I can think is it's a warning for whatever is going to soak the obelisk in blood. Maybe they were sent here to check on why the interloper hasn't finished growing yet, and to complete the process. Now, let's get to real theory territory. The captain's story is definitely based on the Lovecraft story, and it's got me thinking about other Lovecraft stories. Two stories in particular, and their connection to a town called Innsmouth. Innsmouth is a peculiar little port town whose inhabitants are known to suffer from Innsmouth degradation. It's a disease that runs through the entire town, leaving them with narrow heads, flat noses, and bulging staring eyes, with a strange dead fish-like odor coming from them. Strangers to the town are treated with hostility, and the town all worship the esoteric order of Dagon. What's found to actually be happening here is that the Devil's Reef, a deep abyss near the town, houses a colony of deep ones. Fish-like humanoids who worship the fish god Dagon, who made a pact with the townsfolk around giving offerings for gold. Eventually, over time, the two intermingled, and now the entire town is part of the Deep One birthing process. The townsfolk mate with the Deep Ones, and children are mostly human, but as they age, their Deep One heritage shows through more and more until they leave land and sink into the waves to join the others in the Devil's Reef. In fact, the main character is revealed to be descended from them without even knowing of it, and later transforming and going to join his kin below the waves. That description sounded pretty familiar though, didn't it? That's exactly what the older models of Mirelurk kings look like. The other story is about a woman from Innsmouth who marries a man from another town, as presumably she isn't showing full Innsmouth degradation just yet. As the story progresses, it's revealed that she is actually possessed by her father, who keeps exerting pressure on the mind of the husband until eventually it succeeds in completely taking over his body. Similar to the process we are seeing with the captain, as his mind is slowly being taken over by the Mirelurk king, who controls him from the sideline. Now, obviously, those stories are from a completely different mythos, but we have seen them use Lovecraft stories for a baseline multiple times throughout the series. I mentioned how the captain's story was very closely related to one earlier, and in a previous video we discussed the Cabot family and how that's based on the Nameless City, not to mention the fact Pickman and his paintings are in Fallout 4 as well. Lovecraft stories are alive and well throughout Bethesda's Fallout. Now, following that line of thought, maybe the different Mirelurk kings we encounter are at different stages of the life cycle. The designer did say he wanted the frog Mirelurk kings we have in the later games to be more of a Lovecraftian monstrosity. Maybe they're just further along the life cycle than the Fallout 3 Mirelurk kings. Pulling back for a second from the super crazy theory level and to the mid-level crazy, we do have another eldritch being present in the camp. Scattered throughout Fallout 76, we can find these little clowns. One at the mining town of Mulch that had a mine collapse, hiding away with a bunch of blasting caps almost as if it was responsible. One can be found in the White Spring Golfing Club holding a little red balloon. And at the Atlantic City Boardwalk, we can find the most interesting one. Hidden inside a locked door is a shrine to a clown with some poor folks' eyes in front of it. And picking up the picture results in the doors slamming shut and your vision becoming blurry. Also, in the corner we can find one of those same clown dolls, chest bursting from a skeleton. After touching the picture, scattered throughout the boardwalk, a clown can be seen watching you, though never close enough to reach. Throughout the map are more shrines to this same clown, all sharing the same traits: a little clown nearby, someone's eyes placed into a mannequin, and some graffiti about how they saw something. Now, this is all very clearly a reference to the entity from It, and it definitely has its eyes on the captain now. We can find one of its dolls in the camp. Maybe due to the things he's seen, or more likely what he'll do, it's following him. The entity feeds upon fear and is always seen around disasters. Maybe the captain and fisherman are the harbingers of a new apocalypse. An apocalypse that starts with feeding the interloper. As a side note, we did also get a new camp companion who's after my own insane theory crafting heart. Dottie is a ghoul, though she isn't aware of it and believes she's just going through puberty, even though...
That it happened to my parents around the same time as me. Weird coincidence, huh?
Through talking to Dottie, you can put some pieces together about her past. Her parents seem to be conspiracy theory nuts, most likely part of the Free States group. They kept Dottie in a bunker and fed her their truths until water started to leak into their bunker, turning them all into ghouls. Although her parents unfortunately turned feral, Dottie thinks they just began speaking a new growly code and she hopes to return and crack it one day. Though her entire bunker has probably been flooded by the fish by now. Dottie's conspiracies can actually come close to the truth. For example, she talks about Nuka World freezing people for the future, and they did actually do this to their founder. In fact, we find them in Fallout 4. But a lot of Dottie's secrets are like this, with some hint of truth to them. So then, what's her take on fish? They're spies. They're spying on everybody. The fish on the table in front of her has camera lenses for eyes, and she states it's due to the government using them to spy on us. Though she also thinks protections are a fake giant body being operated by the real robots that are tiny and inside its head, which is why she always stomps the grass to take out any hidden robots. So maybe she is just crazy. So far, we've discussed about the aquatic threats that have ended up on the land. But what about the true depths of the ocean in Fallout? Even before the apocalypse, the ocean contained most of the life on Earth. But at this point, the life on land is barely even a blip in comparison. And the things in the ocean are hungry. Washed up on the shores of Boston, we can encounter dolphins, who look fairly unchanged, apart from the fact their teeth are definitely bigger and more pronounced. Some live specimens can be found in the aquarium in Atlantic City, but most that you encounter are washed up on the shore with their stomachs ripped open by something big. In fact, in the ocean surrounding Boston, if you take the time to explore, you can even find dolphins in the same state at the bottom. And we might have an answer as to what that could be. You can encounter two guards discussing Old Peg, a giant ghoul whale.
So one day, my grandpappy was egging. It was a foul day. Fog so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. He was stumbling along and then he heard a tremendous clamoring. From the ocean. Like nothing he'd ever heard before or since. He stood still for a long time. The fog cleared for a brief moment, and that's when he saw the outline of the great behemoth. Massive. Bigger than anything you or I will ever see. Old Peg. A giant blue ghoul whale.
Now, this whale doesn't exist in the game and could be explained away by the Chinese submarine that's in the bay. But even if that's true, what has been hunting the dolphins in the area? The size of those bites are rather huge, so maybe a predatory ghoul whale makes sense. Now, there is one thing I'll never forgive Bethesda for. 20 Leagues Under the Sea. This cut quest would have had us visiting Vault 120, an underwater vault with a bizarre overseer, similar in style to BioShock. As it's cut content, not everything about it is known. Some of these cells are in the game, but only parts of the quests are, and the confirmation for who was Overseer actually came from a Bethesda post getting to meet Christian's Meister. There exists in the game files the skin for a giant squid that was originally thought to be attacking the vault, but now, thanks to this interview, is now confirmed as being the actual Overseer. What could be incredibly interesting to find out is whether this squid was the original Overseer, or mutated along the vault and somehow joined the vault and became Overseer. Either way, its existence doesn't bode well if the ocean is filled with even more sentient beings, as life on land is sorely outnumbered. Those are just some of the behemoths of the ocean that we do know about from hushed whispers, but there is so much we don't know. On the way to Point Lookout, Tobar the ferryman lets you know he doesn't go much further than Point Lookout anymore, as there are too many critters looking for lunch. Considering what we've seen near land, the deep ocean must be absolutely terrifying. And for all of these creatures, it's likely that using their ability to dominate, the Mirelurk kings could raise an army of any or all of these. Mirelurks definitely seem to be their favorite, maybe for how fast they can breed and their strength, or the fact that they can go on both land and sea. Well, the new update shows us that the Mirelurk king can definitely dominate other species. Maybe the warning is about the army they're raising to exterminate the surface once the Interloper finally awakens. The castle, previously known as Fort Independence in Fallout 4, might actually give us some evidence of this. By the time the sole survivor turns up, the walls have been breached and a Mirelurk queen has made this location her nest. But rewinding back, this was the main hub for the Minutemen leaders when they were trying to create a government to protect all of the settlements. Until something, presumably the nearby Mirelurk queen, attacked and wiped out most of the leadership, leaving the Minutemen to face setback after setback until you arrive and rebuild everything. It is possible that this was just due to the queen deciding there was plenty of food and that it looked like a good place to nest, which is likely. But if we do don our tinfoil hats for a moment and think of it from the Lovecraftian point of view, we know from the Winter of Atom that there is a large eldritch city hidden under the glowing sea, and what's inside has tried using the Fuller of Atoms to rise up. The Minutemen leadership were destroyed around 40 years prior to this, but in that time, no other controlling force rose up around Boston. The old gods are nothing if not patient, and the best way to pave a path forward would be to wipe out any obstacles, such as a uniting force in the area that it wants to emerge into. The Synths probably even help with this goal, making everyone distrustful of each other. In the future, I'd imagine some kind of new raid that involves fighting through deep sea creatures, cultists, and finally the Interloper. Though maybe the fun to these mysteries is really in the mystery itself, well, at least for me personally. Just as a last horrifying addition, as I was finishing this, I was rereading through my Winter of Atom book for a new video, and I did discover something else kind of disturbing. As part of Chapter 3, the players stumble upon some Minutemen protecting the Boston Harbor from the ocean. They're eating some strange fruit that will have terrible side effects, but more on that in my next video. More interestingly, the book has this to say about them. The Minutemen guard the harbour shores, keeping an eye out for any ships that get stranded or any strange monsters that come out of the sea. They recently killed a giant squid with 36 arms and 4 human legs. They burnt the body, but still smell like ink. So, despite what little we've seen of the ocean, its depth definitely holds true monstrosities. A giant squid with 36 arms and 4 human legs that can come onto land sounds horrifying. Potentially, it could be even what was killing the dolphins. We don't know yet. But thanks for watching, everyone. What do you think? Are the Mirelurk kings some Lovecraftian monstrosities, or just the result of evolution and mutation? Do you want to see more of the ocean in the future like I do? Let me know down below, and don't forget to do all the usual stuff like subscribing if you enjoy this and joining the Discord if you want to discuss it. We have a nice little community growing over there where I usually discuss videos as I'm working on them. For now though, stay safe out there in the wasteland, and I'll see you next time.